Welcome one more day to Space and Harmony, and today I'm going to speak about the canon of duality, the law of duality, in contrast with the primordial conscience, because this is going to answer many questions. Many of them came from different listeners who suggested interesting subjects, and one of them is concerning the famous movement Q, which you probably know already, is associated with the campaign of the United States President. And the other is concerning the ideas present in a document which a listener suggested me to read. Is known as Revelations by an Insider of an Elite Family. It came out many years ago, but it's becoming popular. And some of the ideas in that document are true. Obviously, the one who is answering the questions knows about ancient teachings. He uses a language which I identify as Freemasonic or Masonic. They like the games, the numerology, and also certain tricks of language that can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. But leaving all that aside, you are going to see the origin of many of these ideas. In that document, the insider says he belongs to an elite family that works for the light, providing tools for humanity in order to evolve. They represent divine law and so on. This is a very ancient idea. Obviously, there are messengers and different groups that work for the light, but we have to understand there are two types of light. There is electromagnetic light and magnetic light. The electromagnetic light belongs to the law of duality and is always fighting or providing tools for choice, the delusion of free will, and therefore promoting the game of duality. Whereas the primordial light is somehow neutralizing, overcoming all deception and helping others to overcome that deception. But we have to adopt this point of view. I'm going to change the perspective because the sun is scorching my face. Now I hope the wind is not interrupting the sound. Anyway, to continue with what I was saying, we have to adopt the perspective of the primordial conscience, and this implies understanding the laws of vibration. One law is the law of 7. You can see many octaves unfolding in reality. That's part of the harmonic essence of everything that emerges. 7 are the main steps, but there are also microtones, intermediate states. We can see that in the rainbow. There are 7 main colors, but different gradations between them. There are 7 days of the week, many different displays of the septenary, the serpent of time. But this can be harmonized as well, as we will see. And the other day, an old woman who is more than 90 years old, she is a friend of mine, wrote me an email. Actually, we exchanged emails from many years ago. And she was saying that leaves in autumn seem to be announcing their death, by changing colors. And she was wondering if the reds, oranges, yellows are part of a universal metaphoric language. And I thought, how beautiful. Obviously, that's true. It's the language of light. The octave begins with red and it follows with orange, yellow, green, blue, another tone of blue, then another tone of violet. Those are the main 7 colors. In music, they would be do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, and do would be the repetition of the first. And the quicker the vibrations of energy, the more subtle is the matter. There is a point in which the vibrations are so quick that energy and matter are one, spirit and matter are one. And the other way around, it's also true. The slower the vibrations of energy, the densest is the matter. And that's when duality appears. So we have to raise the vibration of consciousness in order to harmonize. And this implies understanding the law of three. We have a positive pole, a negative pole, and also a neutral pole that must become neutralizing. It's not the same, neutral than neutralizing. You'll see the difference very clearly. Think, for instance, in a wave. You have the crest of the wave in the sea, the valley, the concave part, and then a state of calm in the sea. The calmness would be the neutral state. The valley of the wave is the passive, negative side, and the positive pole would be the crest, the force, the leading force. But we have to understand as well, there is a wetness shared by all these states. The wetness of the sea is in the crest, the valley, and also the neutral state. And this wetness is somehow neutralizing everything back into the primordial oneness, which is different than the oneness of opposites. We are not blending opposites. We are moving in a conscience which is beyond duality when we are in tune with the primordial source, the primordial magnetic light, which is an unconditional love that also transforms the law of duality. And it's very interesting to notice that the word Kanon in Arabic language means law. It's not coincidence that this word is being used today, I think. The old subject of the law is being brought to light again, I think, because there is chaos and we need order in chaos. But this is all part of an old battle between darkness and light. And we have to remain as witnesses of all this spectacle without participating in the battle. We can help much more from the primordial state. Obviously, there are celestial rulers who put their own messengers of light in order to promote the divine law and bring order into chaos. But that's part of duality as well. And this has to do with many of the religions that have emerged that give the impression that we have to choose good before evil. And there are obviously photons of light and messengers of light that are sent by the stars, our star, for instance, the sun, which is part of the dual game, the exchange of energies. There are architects which are positive. They want to promote fine energies and they help humanity to evolve, but they don't get engaged very much. They leave others do the work for them. And there are also representatives of the dark side, and they work for the moon, so to say, the exchange of energies for the moon. And there are obviously other types of rulers who are fallen on earth. They are even darker. The architects that represent the negative side in the celestial sphere are those who implant physical bodies, and they do it for a certain purpose, and they are allowed to do that because they are part of the celestial duality, which is mirrored on earth. And we have to understand all these connections, because when we are living within the matrix of duality, darkness, the deception comes from many sides, even from the sides which are considered to be positive. As I said in previous episodes, the greatest enemy is Luciferian fallen intelligences that came from before present humanity, and they want to destroy humanity. Many of them operate from the shadows, the unconscious of humanity. But we should not get engaged in those who promote certain type of light to fight against evil, to promote the law, the order against darkness, because that's feeding the conflict. This means we have to understand the law of life, that is not duality but can cross duality. And by the way, life doesn't come from death. This is one of the lies that many people are buying, falling into the old traps. Because life, true life, was even before death came into the cosmos. And the fall of Adam, of Adamic consciousness, into this solar system was due to eating from the tree of knowledge of good and bad, which implies death and resurrection. Adam, the consciousness of humanity, was put to sleep because it was crucified in the astral cross, which are the 4 cardinal points, and in our perspective from the Earth would be Earth, Sun, Moon, and Saturn, the planet of time, according to the ancient teachings. But we also have a cross in ourselves. Later on we'll see that cross. But understand the true law of life is univocous, and it can cross duality, transforming it. This implies adopting the point of view of wetness. In India, for instance, they spoke of an state known as Nirguna, which is without gunas, Nirguna Brahman. And the gunas are the 3 states, which I mentioned before. They call it in Sanskrit Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Sattva is the equilibrium, the balanced state. Rajas is the agitated state. And Tamas is the inertial state. But there is a 4th state of consciousness known as Turiya, the witness, that can lead to a 5th, which is not a state. It's more like the transcendence of all states, and that's known as Turiya Tita. And these words remind me of the word Torah, which means way or law. And this is very beautiful because there is a connection, obviously. There seems to be a primordial teaching which was lost, but it has to be remembered in these times of absolute chaos, so we don't get caught up in the old battle, the battle of white magicians and black magicians. There is a primordial magician which doesn't even step out of the matrix, because we are already outside the matrix in our true divine being. And we don't reject anything. We are not pursuing non-duality. This is, as I say, a question of finding the true a duality, a dual consciousness, which is neither subject nor object, is beyond embracing all of it, even the negative sides. We don't have to worry about having this carnal existence, because the Logos, the primordial intelligence, was in the origin. In him was life, life was the light of men, and the Logos became flesh, because it's not afraid of duality. We can transform duality by taking the cross and following our true master, which is actually the primordial source expressing itself as unconditional love and modified life, the integral conscience. All this brings serenity. And there is a wonderful passage in the New Testament when the so-called Messiah is crucified. The man is crucified, but what is crucified is not the primordial being, the Logos. Adam, the consciousness of humanity, was crucified in this fallen state of the existential verb, and it has to be liberated. But this can only be done by realizing the primordial Logos, the primordial intelligence. And this is why the crucified man says on the cross, everything has been accomplished, and then he releases the spirit unto the Father. Because liberation implies recognizing the crucifixion of our lower self. There is also a part of light which is crucified, and it has to be liberated without fear. And this is why in another passage the Master says, "He who wants to come after me, let him deny his lower self, take up his cross and follow me." This is usually translated as deny himself, but the expression is aparneomai, which is refuse to be the lower self, or refuse identifying oneself with something. And this is very important, because when we don't identify ourselves with the lower vibrations of the self, then we can take up our cross and have it as a light burden. My yoke is easy and my burden is light, the Master said. This is the universal Messiah, not the crucified Messiah of religion. There is a fallen Messiah, which was Adam. He tried to be a Messiah, and he fell. And many star seeds have fallen, trying to help humanity with their own sciences of spirituality, their own divine laws, which can be very divine, but divine architects are fallen as well. We saw what they caused, promoting a universe that plays the role with opposites. And this is not accusing anyone, this is understanding. I explain all this in the essay, and as I have explained many times, all this was taught by the Master, Yeshua, which can be as an incarnation of the true divine law of life, the walking Torah. And it can be seen as an incarnation of Ishu, which is the divine Logos. This is a point of view which can be very helpful to understand and eliminate certain conflicts. But remember, this is not a question of words. The true Tao cannot be spoken. The Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. This can only be understood by tasting the true duality of being, allowing the spectacle of duality to take place around us, but realizing we don't have to choose between the blue pill and the red pill, as Morpheus suggests Neo in the movie Matrix. Morpheus is the god of dreams in mythology. This means the delusion of free will is one of the messages in that movie. Because in this fallen world, there is no free will. Everything is subjected to the laws of 7 and 3. And very few escape this mechanicalness from the true Holy One, which has a law of life which doesn't resist. The will of the Holy One goes through anything and can transform anything, even the material, dual world. I remember one occasion 20 years ago when I was studying in Ireland, and one day I was coming late to a class of Harmonia, so I ran as much as I could, but the classroom was on the 5th floor, and I went upstairs running because there was not a lift. So when I arrived to the top, I was worn out, very tired, and I listened music coming from the room. Then I thought the teacher was still working with the previous students, so I sat on a chair that was by the door, and I felt the vibrations of the piano coming, crossing the door, and pacifying my whole body. All of a sudden, the teacher was playing a nocturne of Chopin, I remember, and I felt this is what I want. I want to transmit this serenity, making the connection between spirituality and harmonia. But it took me 20 years more of inner work and understanding to be able to communicate all this. Anyway, I think it's working, and sometimes I give thanks to the Holy One for being born through me and allowing me to express all this. And this is a way of tasting the full truth here and now. We can experience the wholeness here without waiting for a future rectification. We don't have to be engaged in tikkun, rectification, as Kabbalists promote, or paying karma with dharma. We are not paying anything. Everything has been paid already. Because when we adopt the point of view of the Universal Messiah, we come with an act of love to give our true being. Because the true being is giving its own essence in order to bring the fallen atoms of consciousness to go back to the tree of life, where everyone is wholeness. Everyone is an expression of the wholeness of the Holy One, which is multiplying. And all this implies paying loving attention. Where attention goes, energy flows. Love flows and transforms. Obviously, this is very subtle. We have to avoid being caught up in all forms of duality and realize the true, a dual consciousness, which is not even subject or object, but a wholeness.